Welcome to the Venari podcast. I'm Mari. I'm a senior consultant in the interim solutions practice at Venari Partners. I work with clients to deliver high caliber interim talent to drive projects forward. I'm delighted to welcome Rachel, who is Group Head of Strategy at Currys and has an impressive background with some great brands like M&S, Tesco, and others, leading large-scale strategy and transformation projects. Welcome, Rachel. We're delighted to have you on the podcast today.
Thanks, Mari. Thanks for having me on. I actually started life as a consultant. I spent my first years coming out of university doing that. And it was fantastic. It gave me a helicopter view of all different aspects of business. I was specialising in supply chain and logistics at the time within the FMCG sector. However, I've moved very swiftly on from there. As I realised that I was modelling something called a palette, and I didn't know what a palette was. So I made actually the decision very early on in my career actually to move away from consulting and into industry. And I've moved, as Mari said, from consulting into Tesco, where I spent a number of years in project management and programme management. And finally looking after all the stores, backdoor and warehouse operations and the change that went on in there. And then from there on to M&S, again, back up the supply chain in logistics and also within the food side of M&S as well. And my early part of my career was really focused on actually trying to get an understanding of when you walk into a shop and you see all the different kinds of products that come from all over the world that get into the store just in time to be eaten, I just thought this was amazing. I couldn't quite figure out how it worked. So I recognise I think I spent the first part of my career just trying to figure that out. And then from M&S, I had my family at M&S, my children when I was there. And then I moved from M&S actually back into consulting, and then I did consulting for a short period of time before moving back into industry. And as Mari said, I'm now within my role at Currys. So as Mari said, I've had a background in transformation and change. I flip-flop from industry consulting to industry and back to consulting and industry again. And within that time, I've just had a really broad understanding of both what it's like to be a consultant and to work in industry, and have had a range of experiences on the way.
I'd like to touch on your transition from consulting to industry, because that's a really important inflection point in someone's career. How did you find that move?
So I would say that I've made that transition twice now. I did it first early on in my career. I found initially that move from consulting to industry quite challenging, actually, but thoroughly enjoyable, because you realise that from your consulting background, you have a lot to bring to the table to industry. You've got your analytical skills, your problem-solving skills, which actually can add a tremendous amount of value in an industry environment. But the things that are challenging in an industry is actually how to get stuff done, and who to know, who to go to, who to speak to, how do you make change happen, how do you work with people from all across the industry, and especially if you're moving into an area like retail, it's, there's a very widespread of people of different skill sets that you'll be talking to. And so for me, that transition, I would say it took me at least a year to find my feet. And that's a long time. The first 6 months, you realise quite quickly how you need to adapt and change yourself. But for me, I found that really fulfilling. And then the second time I moved was from later on in my career, when I did a short stint in consulting, and then I moved actually into an interim job at Debenhams. And actually, I found that transition far easier, because I knew what it was like to work in industry. I already knew how to find my way around, how to collaborate, how to work with people, how to get things done, and therefore that transition was far easier.
What would you say in terms of your experience were the main positives and negatives of the transition?
For me, the big pull of working in industry is that you see projects and you see change. You know, if you are staying in change, you see change through from the beginning right to the end, and you get that sense of achievement that perhaps is far harder to get in consulting, where you are a transient person, you're providing advice, and that advice may or may not be taken on board, and you may not be there to see it come to fruition. And so for me, that was the kind of, and has been, continues to be one of the main reasons that I've kind of continued to have stayed within retail and within industry, for that reason, for that sense of achievement, for that sense of satisfaction. However, what I will say is that working in industry does come with its own challenges, specifically perhaps from a career perspective. Within consulting, I think there are a number of advantages, I would say. So, for example, you quite quickly gain a helicopter view of very different types of industries very quickly. You can expand your knowledge very quickly. And there's also a very clear career path if you were to stay in consulting, as you move up the ladder from maybe a manager to a senior manager to a director. Within the industry, it's much harder to get those very broad experiences that get you up the learning ladder very quickly. You often have to spend much more time in a specific role. It'll be much more focused on a specific area. And also the career paths are far less clear, as much based on kind of how you portray yourself, the stakeholders that you make an impact with, and the work that you produce. And also how you navigate between different functions, between your career paths, is also much more opaque. So you have to take far greater control of your own career, I would say, within industry than perhaps you need to do in consulting.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, like you said, the parameters can sometimes be less defined in industry roles versus consulting. And that's one thing I'd be really keen to touch on as well, is it seems that you've had a track record of moving upwards in a lot of the industry roles you've had, for example, Tesco, M&S, etc. What would you say are the key skills that you've nurtured that have led to your ability to progress?
So I think there are a number of skills that I've worked on, and as well as skills, I would say it's an approach as well. So I'll start off with that first. So for me, I've particularly chosen roles where there'll be ones that I think I enjoy, that I think I'll learn a lot from the team, and I think that they will provide me with a opportunity to grow, to learn, to put myself in situations that are potentially outside my comfort zone. And so those are the things that I would say definitely look for when you're moving, either within a role or between roles or looking for your next move. And then in terms of the skills that I've nurtured, I would say, and it depends on you personally, it depends on your strengths and your weaknesses and what you need to focus on. But for me, it was focusing on how to work with various different stakeholders across the business, how to make an impact in those important meetings, how to come across effectively, how to navigate the challenges and the bumps in the road that you'll inevitably face, and how to have resilience when those things do come up. So I think those are the skills, and traditionally these are the skills that will be a life's journey. I'm not entirely sure they're skills that you overcome and move on from. I think they're things that you have to hone and practice all the way through your career as you move on into different roles and progress.
And also, with such a demanding role as group head of strategy, I'd be keen to get your perspective on this. How do you balance your personal life alongside such a time-intensive role?
I would say I think it's challenging for anyone, whatever stage of life you're at, whatever career you're in at the moment. I'm sure everyone has challenges or things going on in their personal life that can intervene or can impact on their day-to-day life and vice versa. And so for me, there are a couple of things. I think one, obviously being organised as much as you can in both your home life and your personal life. I think secondly is making sure that you've got the support around you and you've got what you need that can enable you to be effective at home and in the work environment. And that means having a really clear view on what you want to spend your time doing and what you want to quite happily, you're happy to outsource. So, for example, I am no fan of cleaning, and I know I'm not good at it.
I'm with you on that one.
So if I can outsource that, I will. So for me, it's about being really clear and protective of your time as well. And I think it's always when you've got a busy work and busy life, I think it's very often easy to forget about yourself. And so I would definitely suggest and recommend putting time aside in a day, whenever it is, whether it's an hour at lunch, whether it's half an hour in the evening, to do something that's just for you, that gives you that headspace to invest in yourself, to have some time away. And that hopefully should make you come back the next day far stronger.
Yeah, absolutely. And it feels like you've touched on it there in terms of making sure that people protect time for themselves alongside work. But I guess just expanding on that a little bit, because one topic that comes up a lot is burnout. Is there any recommendations that you would have for people to protect their time alongside work?
Aside from that boxing off time from yourself, I think that there's one other aspect that I think it's worth talking about. And for me, that's definitely quality versus quantity. And I've experienced this quite a bit through my career, having worked with various different people in different roles and seeing how different people react and what they do in different situations. And definitely what I've learned, and I've learned from the great leaders I've been lucky to work with, is the ones that do well are the ones that realize that, for example, you don't need to produce a 100-slide PowerPoint deck, that you don't need to sometimes produce and put in extraordinarily long hours or amounts of work. What is important is being effective and getting to the nub of the challenge, the issue, what you want to say, and being very judicious about your time and about the quality of what you want to do. And sometimes less is more. And you can have the same, if not more, impact by taking that approach than perhaps putting far more effort in, but actually struggling to make your message heard. So I would definitely recommend for anyone who is struggling with burnout is A, protect the time for yourself, and B, look across your day, look across your week. Is there anything that you should be doing that you look at your diary, you look at your diary and you think, actually, I don't need to be there. It's not adding value. What am I bringing to the table? Free up your day, free up your time. Make sure that you're only spending time on the things that matter most. And as I said, make sure you have time for yourself. I think those would be my golden rules.
Well, you've touched on some really interesting points that I'm sure is going to be really useful for our network. So thank you so much, Rachel. It's been great to have you. And thanks again for joining us.
A pleasure. Thanks for having me.